My sister said, "You're only here because Mom forced me. No one wanted you." My uncle added, "And definitely not in that outfit." I clenched my jaw, but when the power went out and everyone's phones started buzzing, I watched her smile vanish. I stood by the sideboard near the dining room archway, clutching my glass of seltzer like it was a lifeline. My dress clung to my back in the humid Charleston air, even with the old ceiling fans spinning lazily above. I hadn't said a word all evening, but that didn't stop the sharp looks. Then Rosalind walked in, purse tucked tightly under her arm, gaze scanning the room like she was royalty forced to attend a peasant's feast. Her eyes found mine immediately, and with that familiar flicker of disgust, and then she walked right over. "You're only here because Mom forced me," she said, low but with enough venom to sink teeth. "No one wanted you." Before I could even blink, Uncle Royce, never one to miss an opportunity to dig, snorted from his spot near the bourbon cart. He lifted his glass, gesturing lazily at my wrapped dress. "And definitely not in that outfit." I didn't move, not an inch. My knuckles turned white on the glass stem, but I kept my mouth shut. The room buzzed with the hum of cheap conversation and stale sympathy, none of it real. I held myself together until the lights flickered. A heartbeat later, the power went out entirely. Darkness fell like a thick curtain, but almost immediately, every phone in the room lit up with the same high-pitched ping, one after the other. I glanced around as faces turned blue-white with screen light. Then I looked back at Rosalind. Her smirk had disappeared. Her jaw went slack. I watched her smile vanish like a shadow chased off by lightning. People like to romanticize death, especially the quiet kind. They say things like she passed peacefully, or she's finally at rest. What they don't talk about is what comes after, the rotten underbelly of family dynamics once the buffer, the glue, is gone. That glue was my mother. And now that she was gone, the cracks in our family weren't just showing. They swallowed us whole. It had been 3 weeks since the funeral. The wake, that miserable, humid gathering in the family house off Montague Street in Charleston, was supposed to be a formality. Closure? We weren't even in mourning anymore, not really. That happened in the weeks leading up to it, watching her shrink away in a hospice bed in her own living room, her voice growing fainter, her grip weaker. I was the one holding her hand through all of it. Not Rosalind, not Uncle Royce, just me. And yet, when they arrived at the wake, it was like I was some imposter who had wandered in off the street. Rosalind hadn't even looked at me when she came through the door. Not until she had something cruel to say. She always did. The house was packed, more people than I expected. Neighbors, old friends, some distant cousins. A few people I couldn't even place. The food lined the counters like a southern potluck survival kit. Deviled eggs, mac and cheese, mini chicken salad sandwiches, casseroles with names you had to guess by texture. I moved through the kitchen slowly, making myself small, keeping my head down. It didn't matter what I wore. It didn't matter how tired I looked. It never mattered. In that house, I was always the other daughter. The one people pitied or forgot to greet. Rosalind, of course, shined. Always the politician, always the poised older sister. She worked the room like she was at a fundraiser. Hugs, handshakes, laughs with a perfect lily. Some of the church ladies murmured about how composed she was. She wore cream, like she was above the grief the rest of us were drowning in. I heard her before I saw her. Her heels tapped through the hallway as she approached the back den. I was refilling my glass near the sideboard, shoulders aching from standing too long. "You're only here because Mom forced me," she said flatly, stopping right beside me. The breath caught in my throat. My hand trembled on the glass stem. "No one wanted you." Behind her, Royce leaned against the archway, his half-glass of bourbon already going to work on his mouth. "And definitely not in that outfit," he added with a dry chuckle, as if that was the killing blow. I clenched my jaw so hard it made my molars ache. My face didn't move. Neither did I, but in that moment, I felt the weight of every slight, every look, every side comment going back decades. Rosalind turned and walked off like she'd just completed a chore. Royce followed, humming some blues riff under his breath. I just stood there, frozen, bile rising like old rage left to rot. And that's when the thunder cracked. The lights above shuddered once, then again, and died. Gasps and groans followed. A few people instinctively laughed. A summer storm had been rolling all evening, but no one thought it would knock out the power. Then, a new sound, distinct, urgent. The buzz of dozens of phones lighting up all at once. It was like a swarm. I looked down at my own phone. A text message. No sender, just a link. As I tapped it open, my heart beat once, twice, then dropped straight to my stomach. It was a video. I didn't need to watch more than 5 seconds to know what it was, but everyone else did. The room changed. I could feel the shift in the air, like pressure before a storm gets worse. People held up their phones. There was an eerie quiet, followed by murmurs, followed by gasps. Rosalind was across the room, frozen, the blue glow of her screen lighting up her face. I didn't, she stammered, but her voice got lost in the mounting whispers. The video showed Rosalind and Royce sitting at our family attorney's office. Calm, calculated. She's leaving that house to Margit, that makes no sense. Royce, she was doped up on pain meds, that's not a sound mind. We'll say she was coerced. Rosalind, Margit's broke, she'll crack under pressure. Royce, and if she doesn't, Rosalind, then we make her look like she stole it, something, we'll figure it out. Their voices, their faces, their plan. Every single person at the wake saw it. Some turned away, others didn't move. Rosalind's expression went from composed to cracking like ice under heat. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit. But there wasn't one. She saw me. Just me. You didn't, she said, horror in her throat. But I didn't have to answer. I didn't need to say a thing. The truth did all the talking. She didn't deny it. That was the most telling part. Rosalind didn't shout that it was fake or scream that it was taken out of context. She just stood there, caught, her lips parted like words had been stolen from her mouth. Her eyes never left mine. It was as if she knew exactly who was responsible for the video making its way into everyone's hands, and she was right. I had the original recording saved on an external hard drive, tucked in my locked suitcase upstairs. Mom had made sure everything was documented, initially out of fear, later out of resolve. She knew her illness wouldn't just take her life. It would invite wolves to circle her home. And I was her only line of defense. The room buzzed louder now. Someone in the dining area dropped their glass, shards of green on the wood floor. Cousin Alice's husband mumbled, "Jesus Christ." Someone else, one of Mom's bridge club friends, walked right out the front door without even bothering to whisper a goodbye. Royce, already 2 bourbons deep, wasn't as silent. "This is bulls, someone hacked us," he bellowed, his voice slightly slurred. No one answered him. He looked around, gesturing wildly at the phones. You can't trust video these days. Could be deep fakes, hell, anyone with a laptop and a grudge. But even he didn't sound convinced. His bluster was folding in on itself. The credibility, the smooth southern drawl he used to charm everyone from the barbershop to the courthouse, it had cracked wide open. Then came the look. Rosalind turned away from the crowd and looked at him, not in shock, not in fear, in loathing. I'd never seen her look at him like that before. For a brief second, the show dropped and something real crossed her face. She realized he'd let them get caught, that he had gotten sloppy. She started toward the kitchen, maybe to get away from the prying eyes or maybe just to collect herself. But I blocked her before she could fully pass. Her chin lifted a little, like she was preparing for a performance. I didn't speak, just looked at her. Up close, I could see the sheen of sweat beading on her temple. Her voice, when she finally spoke, came out quieter than before. "What are you trying to prove?" she asked. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I leaned a little closer and said, "That Mom wasn't blind. And neither am I." Rosalind's eyes narrowed, but there was a twitch in her jaw. She didn't expect that. She thought I'd just vanish after the funeral. Let her take everything like she always did. House, reputation, the narrative. This time, though, she'd lost control of the script. The power stayed out. The house was dim except for candles someone had lit on the mantel and the glow of phones still clutched in quiet hands. It was strange. People had stopped talking altogether. No one approached me. No one tried to smooth it over. They just watched. Royce had retreated to the sitting room and sat with his head bowed, no longer blustering. A man who'd spent his life talking down to others, now reduced to a silent mess in a creaky wingback chair. Rosalind broke the stillness first. She walked slowly to the hallway, her heels in her hand now, trying to hold on to what was left of her dignity. As she passed by 2 cousins near the piano, they stepped aside, subtle but clear. No one was rallying behind her. The very people she tried so hard to impress had gone silent on her. I stayed, rooted to the floor, waiting. listening to the soft thud of her footsteps fade. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about truth. It was about the house Mom had loved and protected and intended for me to inherit, not because I asked for it, but because I was the only one who never demanded anything. Rosalind had always believed she was entitled to everything, just by virtue of being the firstborn. She'd made her life look perfect on the outside. Bank manager, homeowners association chair, Christmas card family complete with a husband who rarely came home on weekends and kids who barely called her by her first name. She collected admiration like trophies. And me, I was the screw-up, the one who moved out of state, divorced, childless. Rebellious, they called it, but here I was, the one who stayed when it mattered. The one who held Mom's hand when she was too weak to lift a spoon. The one who cleaned her, fed her, listened when she cried because she knew her time was short. I didn't do it for a payout. I did it because I loved her. And now everyone knows the truth. Not just about Rosalind and Royce's plan, but about the person Mom trusted most in the end. I looked around the room, at the guests, the family, the neighbors who used to smile at Rosalind like she was the savior of the Kinley family name. Now they wouldn't even look her in the eye. Some were already living in quiet pairs. A few lingered, sipping iced tea and whispering in corners. I didn't need to hear the words. I knew what they were saying. She recorded that. Can you believe they tried to take the house? I always knew Rosalind wasn't what she seemed. Let them talk. The storm still rumbled outside, low and long. Rain tapped the windows rhythmically. I stood there in the dim glow of candlelight and phone screens in the house I had grown up in. And I realized for the first time in decades, I didn't feel like an outsider. I felt steady, grounded, like the walls finally recognized me, but the night wasn't over yet. Royce stood suddenly, his glass dropping to the floor and rolling under the table. He looked straight at me with something in his eyes I hadn't seen before, not just anger. Fear, did she leave you the house outright? He asked, his voice gravelly. You think that'll stand in court? He knew the answer, but he needed to hear it. I tilted my head slightly. The will was witnessed, signed, notarized. And now the whole town knows why. Royce swore under his breath, the kind of swear that comes from old bitterness. His hands shook as he leaned against the wall. I watched him slide back into the chair, smaller than before. Rosalind didn't come back into the room. She was either gone or hiding upstairs. I didn't care which. People were starting to file out. I didn't say much as they left, just a few nods. A few whispered, "Thank you for coming, S." Most of them looked at me differently now. Not with pity, not with disdain, just recognition. They saw me now, they knew. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Because people like Rosalind don't just crawl away and stay gone. No, they regroup, they wait. And something in me was already bracing for what came next. But I wasn't the same little sister anymore. And this wasn't her house to run. This was Mom's house. Now mine. And I was finally ready to fight for it. I slept in Mom's bed that night. It still smelled like her. Lavender sachets in the closet, the faint trace of her rose water lotion on the pillowcase, even after I'd washed it twice. I lay on my back, staring at the cracked ceiling she always said she'd repaint, and I didn't cry. Not once. I'd done all my crying in the last few months, in silence, in the bathroom, in the garden while pulling weeds from under her camellia bushes. I had cried during the hospice visits, cried when she stopped being able to eat, cried when she whispered, "Don't let them take it from you." I promised her I wouldn't. The next morning, I brewed coffee in her old percolator, just because I knew it would make the kitchen smell like Saturday mornings. I opened the windows to let the post-storm air roll in, thick with magnolia and soaked soil. I watered her orchids. Then I called her lawyer. Mr. Dillard was a polite man in his 70s who had known Mom since they were teenagers. He'd been at the wake, though he'd left quickly after the video. He didn't need me to explain what had happened. He just asked what I wanted to do next. "I want to make sure they can't touch the house," I said. He chuckled softly. "Elaine planned for that, there's trust. Your name's on everything, title, deed, utilities. The house passed straight to you the second she passed. And if they try to contest it, they won't get far, the video helped. Can I make them back off permanently?" There was a pause on the line. Then he said, "You have some leverage now, use it." That was all I needed. The letter I drafted to Rosalind was short and careful. It wasn't angry, just honest. I reminded her that the will had been updated under proper legal supervision. I reminded her that her conversation with Uncle Royce was now public, and that pursuing any kind of contestation would trigger a full court proceeding, requiring depositions from everyone, including some of Mom's friends who had heard her complain about Rosalind in her final days. I attached a copy of the trust documents, then I gave her a choice. Option 1, you accept Mom's wishes and walk away. No lawsuits, no contests. Option 2, you try to challenge it. And I make sure every detail becomes public record, including your husband's 2 affairs, which Mom also knew about and documented in her journals. I knew she'd read it. But just in case, I sent another copy to Royce. I waited 2 days. On the 3rd day, I got a response. It was a single-line email. Fine, keep the damn house. No apology, no admission, just surrender. But it was enough. That weekend, I hosted a small brunch at the house. I invited only people who mattered. My Aunt Leela from Savannah, who had cared for Mom years ago after her first surgery. 2 of Mom's best friends from church, who had brought casseroles and warm hugs through every stage of her illness. The hospice nurse, Marcy, who had sat with us for 12-hour shifts without complaint, and cousin allies, who told me during the wake, I always knew you were the only one who gave a damn. We sat on the back patio with mimosas and cheese grits, the air thick with the smell of gardenias in bloom. I didn't bring up the video, or the inheritance, or Rosalind at all. Instead, I told stories about Mom, good ones. The time she danced barefoot in the rain when it hit 100 degrees one summer. The time she let us skip school just to watch an eclipse. The way she used to hum when she baked. They laughed. Some cried. We remembered her for who she really was, not the woman caught in family crossfire, but the woman who had loved fiercely and protected her peace until the very end. About a month later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a card with a watercolor of hydrangeas. Inside, in Rosalind's familiar cursive, was just 3 sentences. I was angry. You won. I hope you do something good with it. That was the last I heard from her. I didn't write back. I stayed in Charleston. Took over Mom's garden, replanted the things she never got to finish. I joined her church book club, not for the scripture, but for the stories. I worked remotely from her old writing desk, and every so often, I'd open her last journal just to read the places where she scribbled memories. Margaret singing in the bathtub, 1989, or made her tea with honey when her throat was sore. She always liked it that way. The house, for the first time, felt light, and revenge, it wasn't the video. It wasn't the fear in Rosalind's eyes when the lights came back on. It wasn't the silence from Royce, who I heard had been quietly cut out of a few family invitations since the wake. The revenge was peace. It was standing in the doorway with coffee and a breeze on my skin, knowing no one could take it from me now. Sometimes, protecting what matters isn't about screaming louder than the ones who try to drown you out. It's about letting the truth find its voice when the world finally quiets. And sometimes, the most satisfying revenge isn't destruction. It's survival, with grace, on your terms, in the home that love built without them.